Hello and welcome to episode 119 of the Notcast. Today I will be talking about not just my favourite Stanley Kubrick movie, but one of my favourite movies of all time. In the previous episode, I talked through the ranking, how I ordered by order of my preference the Stanley Kubrick films up to and including number two. But number one deserves a longer conversation in its own right. The film is The Shining. The tide of terror that swept America is here, as the advert went when the film was released in Europe in 1980. It is one of my favourite films, and it's a film that has a lot of meaning for me, and it ties in with a lot of my childhood experiences, a lot of my memories growing up, and because obviously I grew up in a haunted hotel, didn't I? I mean, who didn't, right? But also around the many layers and the many different stories that the film is telling at the same time. And to understand the film and why I have such a high opinion of it, I have to start with a quote from Stanley Kubrick, which is that anything that presupposes life after death has to be optimistic. By that yardstick, The Shining is easily the most optimistic of the Stanley Kubrick movies, because it's the only film that addresses horror, supernatural, the paranormal, anything along those lines. And as I've mentioned in my Halloween episode, way back in the embryonic days of me starting to talk about things on the Notcast, I talked about a paranormal experience that I had in 1999 that I cannot rationally explain, and absolutely, definitely did happen, and not just to me. So The Shining is based upon a 1977 Stephen King novel, and despite the fact that Stephen King absolutely loathes Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining, I think Stanley Kubrick actually had some nice things to say about Stephen King, although I far prefer Stanley Kubrick's version to any others. So I'm going to talk through from some pages in the Stanley Kubrick Taschen Archives book, where Stanley Kubrick talks about firstly why he's made movies based upon books and novels, but also about Stephen King, and he says the one great advantage taking from literary material is that you have the opportunity of reading the story for the first time. I suppose if you had an idea yourself that you liked and developed, your sense of whether or not the story was interesting would be almost gone by the time that you wrote it. The advantage of a story you can read is you can remember what you felt about it the first time that you read it, and that serves as a useful yardstick on making the decisions that you have to make directing the film. Because with somebody else's story, you can become so familiar with it after a while that you can never really tell what it's going to seem like. But if you've read it, you have the first impression of the story and your first ideas, which are very important. So when you're reading a novel, you're not necessarily able to go, so this is all leading up to here. That idea hasn't occurred in your head. You're led by the hand, by the writer and the narrator through the story, and then all of a sudden you end up somewhere which you might not necessarily have experienced. And talking of why he chose The Shining, he said, I thought the plot, ideas and structure were much more imaginative than anything I've ever read in the genre. It seemed to me one could make a wonderful movie out of it. King's great ability is in plot construction. He doesn't seem to take great care in writing. He seems mostly concerned with invention, which I think he's very, very clear about. Now, a lot of people go, horror movies. Now, horror being, gore, blood, guts, and a monster in the corner and a jump scare. To me, the most horrific films that there are often films where the idea is about evil and actions and horror and being powerless in certain situations. So, for example, The Exorcist, which is a great horror movie, is also quite unambiguous around it. It relies a little bit on the kind of combination of gore and shock and revulsion, and it's almost like body horror in some respects. Whereas the ideas in The Shining, you could watch The Shining and you could think that actually it's a movie about a man who's lost or had a break with reality in his own mind, and the ghosts and the supernatural and the paranormal which appear in the film only exist in his head, because the other characters of the other characters that interact with the evil forces that are present in The Shining, Wendy doesn't really interact with them in any substantial way. She reacts to them, but she doesn't interact with them. Danny sees visions, but he's always seen visions. And Jack is the only one that it really seems interested in, and the spirits or the forces which occupy the Overlook Hotel seem to be far more interested in controlling Jack so they can get to Danny as opposed to anything else. So, taking this now sun-beaten copy of the Taschen Archives and putting it over there, you can probably hear the thud of it as several £1,000 of hard paper lands with a whoomph upon my desk. Actually, you couldn't. What I'll do is talk about the film. And there are two versions of the film which exist. There's three versions which have been shown publicly, but there are two versions that exist these days. And I'll address the third version when we get to that. So there's an international cut, which was shown in Europe, which is about 119 minutes. And there's an American cut, which is sometimes called the extended edition in the UK, which runs for about 147 minutes. For the purposes of the discussion, the version I'm going to be talking about is the extended version, which so far is only available on Blu-ray in this edition here. I think the Premium Collection Extended Edition. It was available on a US DVD. All the versions of The Shining from the US are the extended cut. The version which has the two editions of the movie on is this UK version here, which has the extended edition having its first home release in the UK. And after Stanley Kubrick died, the extended version of The Shining has been released on home disc. Here it is. But also it was shown in the cinemas in 2012, and of course I went to see it because one of my quests in life is to see all the great Stanley Kubrick movies in the cinema with my own eyes. So far, the one of the major ones that I haven't had a chance to see is Barry Lyndon, and that's because that's hardly ever shown in the cinema. But the version to watch is the 148-minute version, which is on here. So, The Shining is probably about 4 films in one at the same time. It's a haunted house movie. It's a divorce movie. It's a film with allegories around history. It's a film about compulsion and a human desire to work. And it's also a film about creativity. The plot being that Jack Torrance, a frustrated writer, is taking his family up to the Overlook Hotel to be the caretaker for the hotel during a winter period, so he can use the downtime to concentrate on his writing. Anybody that's creative will probably agree that writing isn't necessarily a tap. You can't switch it on and switch it off. Sometimes it comes in a flow, and sometimes you just sit there and nothing happens, and all you do is type "all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy" endlessly on a sheet of paper. And that's not really writing. That's you're more being a scribe or a typist as opposed to a writer. A writer creates something in the space between the spaces, and there's a narrative in here which is well worth a story in its own right. But it's not the one that Jack's writing, it's the one that Jack's living, and he's such a bad writer he doesn't necessarily even realise he should be writing about that. So the film is very dense. It opens and there's mirror imagery all the way through the movie, all the way through it. So if you watch the movie, what you'll frequently see is callbacks, doubles, mirror images, right from the opening shot of the movie, which is a helicopter shot. They do it with a drone now, flying over a lake, and the reflection of the lake is a distorted and perverted version of obviously what is actually in reality above. And so what you start right from the off is saying that there's two worlds. There's a submerged world which is different and distorted from the real world, and there's lots of other elements that touch onto the duality of man. So the Jungian thing, as they say in Full Metal Jacket. So there's the intro, there's the first vision that Danny has when he looks in the mirror and he sees someone else. There's the breakfast scene, which has got the reflection of the mirror, which is inside their room. There's Halloran's room, which is built on a symmetry, so it's near enough a mirror image either side. There's the twins that appear. The vegetation is designed to mirror each other, so it creates a symmetry that's inside there. room 237 is a veritable hall of mirrors, and it's only through looking at a mirror that the true nature of what happens in room 237 is revealed to the people inside it. There's the maze, there's the Grady twins, and also there's the two names that are used for Delbert Charles Delbert Grady, who is the caretaker of the Overlook. The Overlook itself also has two visible entities that interact with Jack. One being the barkeep, played by Joseph Turkel, and the other one is Grady, played by a repeat actor that you will have seen in Clockwork Orange and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom as the very stuffy Major. And there's also the red rum scene. So the red rum scene reveals the true nature of the word by looking in the mirror. So the mirror imagery is all the way through it here about being two realities that coexist, and almost a mirror being the portal that provides your way through the two realities. And there's also the reality that exists with the one that exists inside the minds of the people that are in the film, and the ones that are the realities that are actually happening. So the version of reality that Jack sees is often very, very divorced from the version of reality that Wendy sees. So when Wendy goes into, I think, the gold room, and Jack is there, and Jack has been talking to a barman, she sees an empty room with all the lights switched off. Jack sees a room with all the lights switched on and a barman there, who disappears as soon as he looks up. And it's a very interesting film in the way in which it deals with the layers of reality and how real reality actually is. Now, if you're a creative person, Jack pretends to be creative, but we don't see him do any creative activity in the course of the film. What he does is also he's creating an alternate reality that should exist upon the page, but maybe the Overlook has taken control of that creative energy and turned it into creating a false reality that exists only in his mind. It's a fantastic film. It works on so many levels. I adore it. Now that's the just talking about the duality that's inside the film. It's also reflected in the two versions of the film, by the way. But we also have a false reality that's created by the shape of the Overlook itself. If you look at the map of the Overlook Hotel, Ullman's room in the map backs onto a corridor, but yet when you look through the window in Ullman's room in the film, it backs onto the outside. And it's a very, very strange film in that respect. It's easy to get lost, as if somehow the hotel is creating alternate versions of reality that don't really exist. There's an artifice inside. So the maps, the maze, for example, is a mirror image of itself. It's an artificial map. Household objects appear and disappear. So there's a scene where Jack is arguing with Wendy and talking to her, and the chair behind him appears and disappears again. The typewriter changes colour. Now, how much of this is deliberate? How much of this is bad continuity work? I don't know. One of the things that Kubrick always said is that the horror falls apart when you analyse it. It's meant to be experienced as opposed to being analysed. And maybe I'm guilty of over-analysing it. Certainly wouldn't be the first time. But the more you watch it, the film is like an onion. The more layers that you can see that sit within it. So there's also household objects become objects of terror. Now, one of the things that Kubrick's team specialised in was imbuing a symbolism inside basic objects, which sounds really, really strange until you realise that, for example, a tennis ball is always seen as an object that indicates an intervention by the ghosts. If the ghosts are real, the typewriter changes colour. So is somebody messing with that? The mirror in the bedroom kind of creates an alternate reality that sits alongside that, and then the mundane and the comfortable become threatening in a very slow, very precise way, to the point where you start to doubt the evidence of your own eyes and ears, and you're looking at it and going, is this really real? Is this thing really happening? And that's what horror really is when you don't even trust what your brain is telling you. There's I'm of the view that Jack may be experiencing a breakdown or some very, very serious mental health episode throughout the course of the movie, and somehow he's got a degree of cabin fever that's perverted and distorted the reality that he lives in. It's a compelling way of looking at it. Is actually The Shining is a film about a man going mad, and you're experiencing it largely told from his perspective. So things no longer make sense. Objects become objects of terror. There's a scene where he's locked inside a kitchen storeroom, and he's talking to somebody else, but you never see the somebody else. So you don't know who the somebody else is. You don't even know if the somebody else is real or if he's just talking to himself. Um, and in fact, it's only when the somebody else that he's talking to unlocks the door that you think, okay, so that's the first time there's an actual, tangible, realistic intervention that you can't argue with. Although, of course, the other view is there's actually a door that's on the other side of the storeroom that's probably not locked that he might have got out of anyway. So it's all very drenched in ambiguity. And the film itself has a perversion of order in so much as what we take as kind of standard and read and understood, we start to doubt it. You know, even the scenes where Danny is on his tricycle and he's moving through the house, he's being followed and pursued by a Steadicam. The first use of Steadicam in films, by the way. And the Steadicam is a bird of prey in the way that a bird of prey observes and watches before it strikes. So every time you see the Steadicam following somebody through, that isn't the camera is not a passive observer. The camera is actually the point of view of the Overlook Hotel, and it's following a person. It's observing them before it strikes. And it's a fascinating way of reading the film. Now there's a number of other things around the film that are really important. I think it's a very, very powerful film about divorce. You know, watching the couple arguing in the film is very reminiscent of the arguments that I heard when I was a child and the arguments that anybody has heard as a child, where sometimes you get like a tiny thing and it just flips and everything boils over. And there's the scene where Jack Torrance talks about the sanctity of the contract, the commitment that I've understood. Do you not understand what an undertaking this is? I have made a contract. It's effectively a holy vow. I cannot break this contract. And it's around commitment. And marriage is a contract. Marriage is a commitment. Work is a contract. Work's a commitment. And being whoever you are to whomever it is, you make a contract and a commitment to that. And if you break those contracts, there are consequences around that are very, very important and have big ramifications. So when the hotel starts to intervene in the process and it starts to say to Jack, people are trying to bring outside forces into this, you need to correct it, you need to intervene. It's like, I need to take care of the hotel or the hotel will take care of me. And of course, there's a line that comes from Grady where he says, you've always been the caretaker, as if to say that actually at that point Jack's identity has been subsumed and Jack is just a vehicle that's being driven by the caretaker, whatever the caretaker is. And so the caretaker could actually be the hotel itself. And when you go into the hotel and you become the caretaker of the hotel overtakes parts of your motor functions to the extent that you don't even know. Now there's a wasp, which I wasn't expecting to say, but yellow and black. There's a wasp which I think there's a parasite that burrows into, the brain of a wasp or a fly or something like that, and it effectively takes over the cognitive brain functions of the animal, so it effectively, drives the animal. And whilst the animal itself does the things like flying and eating and so on, but it doesn't have the ability to make decisions. It could be that the hotel is a parasite in a very similar fashion to that very, very terrifying larvae. Imagining if you're, especially if you're having a mental health episode, and sometimes people do, and I saw an episode of EastEnders today that referred to that, is that, you're not necessarily in control of your own decisions or your own thoughts or anything like that. It's very difficult sometimes to understand when you are and when you aren't thinking correctly, and to have this monster inside of you, someone that you never knew and it won't leave you alone, is to think about, okay, so that's whatever the monster is that lives in your head, and there are monsters and they're real and they look just like people. So that's The Shining is a fantastic divorce movie, both people, whether they're any good at it or not, want the relationship to work, but they're both pulling in different directions. They think they've got different ways of achieving the same thing. And yes, as a person that has been divorced, I do know that it's a very difficult realization when you think, okay, so all that time, all that energy that I've put into a person, and it's not being rewarded, it's not being returned, it's not coming back to me at all. And I should probably liven up the visual a little bit as opposed to just pointing a DVD or a Blu-ray in front of me. Pretend this is Jaws 3D: The Revenge, and just go through the lobby cards that are in the Blu-ray. There, how exciting and completely basic is that? So it's got the DVD and it's got the Blu-ray on there, and the Blu-ray has the extended edition of the film. I absolutely adore The Shining. It is one of the best films ever made to me. It's also got historical allegories. So as you kind of might mention, that there's a lot of references to Indians. The design of the hotel rooms is based upon the interior of a place called, I think it's the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite. The exteriors were shot at the Timberline Lodge in Mount Hood. The Gold Room was designed after something that Frank Lloyd Wright had designed. It's all built in a way that presents a certain thing. So you look at the colours, the golds, the reds, the Indian tapestries that are on the walls, and the use of calumet baking powder, the use of Halloran as the saviour of that, and it's all kind of can be seen as an allegory about the Red Indians and the way in which the land was colonised. Obviously, all these theories and plenty of other batshit theories are in the DVD of this film, Room 237, which is utterly, utterly bizarre. There's points where you're kind of watching it and you go, whoa, man, I'll have what she's having, because whatever you're having, it is crazy. It's like the hallucinogenic scene in The Simpsons where a talking coyote has the voice of Johnny Cash, and Homer Simpson hallucinates gigantic flying pyramids. Kubrick declined The Exorcist in 1973. He was offered it because he felt that there wasn't any ambiguity in the movie, and he also downgraded the use of or the alcoholism subplot, which is in the King novel quite strongly. And the reason that King has disowned the film of The Shining, he made his own version of it, was because the alcoholism which Jack has is used as somewhat of a crutch to explain his relapse. So the novel is kind of a film about a man relapsing into and giving into his inner demons, whereas the film itself, it's not explained in that way at all. Not explained in any way that's really obvious. There's just an evil that exists, and much like as is intimated in the film Swimming to Cambodia, it's kind of like in Twin Peaks, there's like a cloud of evil and it lands on certain places, and in The Shining it lands upon the Overlook Hotel, and it really kind of has its effect upon there. And it's although it's very, very clear when Jack is in the Gold Room and he's talking to the barman and he says, "I'd sell my soul for a drink," and then there's a pause and he looks up and there the barman is, where previously he wasn't. At that point, as soon as he takes the drink, he's got the devil's bargain, and he's effectively traded his soul and become something else. There's also and then all of a sudden all the other wheels are set into motion. This also happens in 2001 actually, where Hal says, just a moment, and you can hear, and the computer's thinking, and then at that point all the wheels that set up the rest of the movie start to happen, because there's a decision point there and it goes one way and the rest of the dominoes topple out. It's a very powerful film in so much as you can read almost anything into it. Now there's also actually, although it's not kind of shown in here, this is some segments on the making of The Shining from the Stanley Kubrick box set, which I showed you previously. What you've got is in fact, and it's more explicitly obvious in the American version of the film, is the television itself is almost another character. So the television is seen in multiple scenes. It's almost watching what's going on. And it implicates the viewer as a voyeur, actually, especially with the camera which follows people around. It kind of says, you wanted murder and entertainment, here's murder for entertainment. And there's a number of murders in the film, and it's portrayed. I mean, sometimes the stories around the making of the film are legendary. This is Full Metal Jacket. I don't know why I'm going on to that, so I'll move over. The stories around the making of the film are somewhat legendary. That Kubrick would use the 100th take or the 129th take. There's a scene where they're arguing on the stairs, and I think for some reason that went up to something like 120, 130 different takes, and you could, according to what people said who were in the making of documentaries and the books, they said what you can see Jack Nicholson kind of coasting and moving it through. He's holding back his energy, then he's bored, then he goes crazy, and then you use the crazy version of it, and what it does is it sets the tempo of the film as like reality, but 14% bigger, so it's not quite right, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Like if you meet somebody that's 7 foot tall, sorry if anybody that's 7 foot tall, by the way, you meet somebody that's 7 foot tall and they look okay, but they look like they're the wrong shape or the wrong size for the world around them, because the world is designed for 6 foot tall guys. Or if you go to a castle, by the way, it's probably designed for guys that are like 5'6", because human beings have got taller over the past couple of centuries. But it's a film where the reality itself, you have to start questioning what is the reality that's in here, and then the acting moves beyond acting. It becomes just being. So the bit where Jack Nicholson starts talking about per second, and it's like that's the way people talk. People don't talk in the way in which dialogue is constructed in movies. Dialogue is poorly constructed in most movies because most dialogue is written for the page. It's not spoken out loud. And the best dialogue that you've got in a movie is dialogue that's spoken out loud, where somebody has talked through it so that it sounds the way that people actually talk, as opposed to the way that writers write. And it's clear when you kind of listen to and you hear the talking that there is in the film, that this is the reality, the way that people actually talk around things, as opposed to the way script writers write. There is a deleted scene that was filmed, but it wasn't ever shown in the cinemas, by the way, which is where Jack is in one of the rooms that's empty, and he hears voices in the ballroom. This is before he goes to the ballroom, by the way. He hears voices and he starts to follow the sound of the voices. And he's standing in a corridor and a tennis ball rolls down. And it stops in much the same way, by the way, that when Jack is on the carpet and the tennis ball rolls down and stops. No, not Jack, Danny. And by the way, if you watch that scene, what you'll realise is that Danny's turned around in between shots, so he's facing one way with the carpet in a shape like that around him. But when it actually comes around to it, the carpet's shaped like that, and he's facing the same way, so he's actually turned around, which means now, on a day-to-day basis, that's a continuity error. But from a film analyst basis, that's also, okay, reality isn't quite reality anymore. And there are these little subtle clues when you're watching the scenes and you realise that things are changing and reality can't be trusted. So there's a scene where Jack hears voices, the tennis ball comes down, and he starts to follow where the tennis ball came from. And I think that is the scene that leads him into the gold room, where he goes and says, I'll sell my soul for a goddamn drink, because that's exactly the next thing that he does. The use of the tennis ball, by the way, I don't think that's unintentional. I think there's some symbolism there which draws in with The Great Escape. If you remember The Great Escape, Steve McQueen had a tennis ball that he would always kind of move in and out of his hands and catch into his catcher's mitt. And it's perhaps almost indicating that the Overlook has become a prison and they are trying to find a way out of it. Again, I could be reading too much into it. I don't know. There's a number of other tricks, actually, which are really, really interesting in the film. So there's the use of the title cards. So as you watch the film as it progresses through, and here I'm going to show you some pages from a Stanley Kubrick in Pictures book, because I can. When you go through the title cards, that are in the film. The title cards become shorter and shorter in terms of period of time. They're telescoping towards an event and an outcome. So the title cards start off with next month. Then it's like, Thursday. Then it goes to 8 a.m., 4 p.m. And then all of a sudden everything kind of collapses together, and it becomes very, very different. And the whole events of probably the last half an hour play out in the film in real time. It's also there's some dialogue that's in the American version of the film, not in the UK version of the film. The American version of the film that is dehumanizing. So when after Jack has started drinking, he refers to Wendy as the old sperm bank and a bitch. He starts to become more childlike. He starts to become more inarticulate, especially towards the end. He takes the role of almost like a minotaur lost in a maze. And the name of the production company which Stanley Kubrick had for Killer's Kiss, I think the killing is Minotaur Productions. It's not unintentional there. That scene of Jack staring and surrounded by the snow, just going, as he's like frozen to death, is not unintentional. It's all there. It's all there if you know what you're looking for. There's also there's other callbacks to others of his films. So where he's in room 237 and he's holding the woman who's in room 237, it's a repeat of a shot that's in Lolita. Actually, there's a man that's in a forbidden embrace, watched by someone else, and when he looks in the mirror, he realizes that somebody else is watching him. And that ties in with the mirrors, it ties in with the alternate realities, it ties in with what is real and what isn't real. But also, it calls back to his other films. Joe Turkel, who is the barman, appears in Paths of Glory. The actor who plays Charles Grady, whose name I've temporarily forgotten, is in A Clockwork Orange. It's like a lattice work of references inside itself to things around reality, and the connection that there is between that. It's all kind of building this bigger thing where suddenly you can look at it and you can almost see anything that you want in a hall of mirrors, because it all points inside itself to all the other points that are in there. The bottom line is it's a fantastic haunted house movie. It's a powerful divorce movie. It's quite compelling when it comes to things around work and creativity and compulsion and addiction and alcoholism. But what it doesn't do, and this is again why Stephen King doesn't like it, is it doesn't address the alcoholism as a major part of the plot. It's part of it, but it's not the major part of it. And so you've got the sequel, Doctor Sleep, which is strangely enough a sequel to both the book and the film, and the remake of the film, which came in the late 90s, starring Rebecca De Mornay and a couple of other people, which is far inferior to the Stanley Kubrick movie. And the last bit of the film is probably, I think, the bit where the most obvious kind of changes kind of sit. There's a scene where Wendy is running around inside the hotel and she suddenly turns a corner and she's faced with skeletons. And I don't know if those skeletons are real. I have no idea. Nobody does, because at that point reality has untethered itself from what everyone is experiencing. Jack's version of reality is very different from Wendy's, is very different from Daddy's, very different from Halloran's, and somehow the hotel is manipulating everybody that's inside it. Now, I first saw that scene in the extended version that was shown by mistake in the UK on Midlands Television in, I think, late 1991, early 1992. I recorded it on VHS. And there was no announcement that they're showing the extended edition of the Stanley Kubrick movie. It was in the middle of the night. It was shown, I think, starting midnight and finished probably about 3:15. So you had to have a 4-hour tape, an E240, and you had to make sure that it recorded it. And it showed the extended American version for the first time in the UK. And the extended American version is now on this Blu-ray. So the extended American version, 148 minutes, is absolutely the best version to watch. If you watch a short version now, it feels like you're watching a badly butchered television edit where someone's just nipped and tucked everything to make it shorter and quicker and faster and get to the scary bits. The last thing, and I've mentioned this before, there's a third version of the film that exists that hasn't been shown since 1980 that has an extra scene. So the last scene of the film, which happened, which closes up onto a photograph of Jack being present at the Overlook Hotel July 4th, 1921 celebrations, which was surprisingly 100 years and a week ago now. That was not the last scene in the film in the first few showings. So I think for the first 3 days there was a different ending. There was a scene at the end where Wendy and Danny were in the hospital, and Ullman came into the hospital and threw a tennis ball at them, or had a tennis ball in his hand. And what he was indicating there is very simply that Ullman himself was, maybe knowingly, maybe unknowingly, part of the hotel, knew what was going on, and was implying to both Wendy and Danny that this wasn't over. And that ties in with your standard horror movie shock ending, where Carrie comes out through the grave. Jason Voorhees' mum rises from the grave. Somebody rises from the grave. A monster comes out of the water. It's all the same, the shock ending. But actually, Kubrick saw that scene. There's a little bit of photographic evidence of it, but it's not been seen by anybody apart from the Kubrick estate for over 40 years now. And I think that really should have been in the deleted scenes, actually. Because what it implies is that the land itself is evil. It's got control. It's immortal. It's always been the caretaker. It's always there. It's always watching. And it's got control of people that perhaps don't even realise they're serving the purpose of the hotel. It's never explained why the Overlook is a source of paranormal and supernatural activity. It's never given any reason. But then, does it need to have a reason? Because if you watch Groundhog Day, it's never explained why Bill Murray has to live 10,000 days in repeat. Never explained, doesn't need to be explained. In the same way that perhaps The Shining doesn't need to be explained, it just is. And that reminds me of the quote from Kubrick, which is, around the point is that, the universe is neither caring nor uncaring. It will just kind of carry on. As it is. I better go and find the quote back in a second. So the quote from Kubrick is, the most terrifying fact about the universe is not that it is hostile, but that it is indifferent. But if we can come to terms with the indifference, then our existence as a species can have genuine meaning. No matter how vast the darkness, we can bring our own light. And that's probably the best place to end this episode. I think The Shining is one of the best films that's ever been made. It speaks to me in many, many ways. It speaks to me about creativity, about addiction, about relationships and divorce and the weight of history and work and the commitments that go with it. And I can see all the things in it. And it's perhaps one of the finest examples of a genuine horror movie that there is, because it's not about the monster in the closet. The question is not, is there a monster in the closet? The question of the movie is the monster even real? And when you start to doubt the very tenets and the very foundations of the reality in which you see it, the evidence of your eyes, the evidence of your ears, the evidence of your heart and your soul and everything that goes with it, then the question is it real? Is it happening? So for me, The Shining is one of the best films ever made, and I am probably going to wrap up there. If you haven't seen it, I've probably spoilt it for you completely. Well, to be honest, it's 40 years now, so we don't need to be doing spoiler alerts in this respect. I am going to wrap up here. I don't know what the next one is I'm going to talk about. I haven't got a clue yet. I'm sure that you will be able to, if you follow me on Twitter, occasionally I put up a poll and I ask what people are going to be interested in hearing me talk about next. And you've got an opportunity to vote there. If not, you can always put something in the comments. I will link to other videos if I can find them that are relevant, but obviously under the fair use principles and under YouTube itself, I won't be posting a link to a full-length streaming version of The Shining for you to watch. I'm afraid you'll have to find that yourself. I believe it is on a number of major streaming services. It is one of my favourite films of all time, and every time I see it, I see something new in it. It's an incredible movie. I wish that more movies were that good. I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you for paying attention to me talking about my favourite film for 40 minutes. And for some reason, when I talk about movies, not as many people watch them. I think you guys are more interested in hearing me talk about records and music and bands that I love. And that's okay too, because I'm never going to run out of bands and I'm never going to run out of films. Um, so the next one is almost definitely going to be music related. And in the meantime, look after yourselves. I will see you all again soon. Stay beautiful. Bye.